Well, welcome everybody. Kind of a hard act to follow this evening. I just spent an hour with one of the authors of the Comprehensive Literacy for All. And we just did a Q&A with David Copenhaver, which was very exciting. So if you get a chance, I'm sure that will be up on the SETSI YouTube channel and take a look at that. There are going to be more conversations happening, and I have that at the end of this presentation. So don't worry if you didn't know, I'm not sure when that's going to happen again. I have that set for you. So welcome. I missed everyone in December. I'm sorry I wasn't here with you, but I know my fearless co-host was here and did a great job. So we're gonna get started. So on behalf of the Special Ed Tech Center, we are here today to talk about reading comprehension and vocabulary instruction, one of my favorite topics, chapter 7. And we'll just get going. So unfortunately, Heidi can't be with us this evening. So I'm going to be here. And my name is Sharon Redman. I am a special education teacher and an assistive technology specialist. I work for and do some work with SETSI. And I also, right now, I'm a student. I am getting my PhD at Penn State and in special education and part of the AAC leadership project as well, which is super exciting. So for almost 4 weeks into the school year. So things are ramping up. So welcome. I'm excited everybody is here and with us. And even if you haven't read the book or this chapter yet, that's okay, because we will do some highlights and start and have some hopefully some really robust conversations about this, and maybe some of the, if there were people here that were just in the previous conversation with Dr. Copenhaver, that you can chime in and give some of your information. So what I'd love just to remind everybody is just, if you wouldn't mind just going ahead and muting yourself, that'd be great. And then if you have a question, go ahead and put that in the comments or in the chat. I did put the link in there, and I'll have Annie put that, refresh that a couple more times. So if you want to get to the Canva link, you can do that. If you are a learner that needs to have that in multiple ways, then you have that. So we are not giving up Jamboard. We're going to use it to the last day. So, but if you have some questions or comments, we'd love for you to use the Jamboard, and there'll be a link later for that as well. Well, let's get started. We have a busy, whoa, what's happening? Oh, the Jamboard, here it is. So here we have been using this all the way through. So please go ahead and put down maybe some of your thoughts about how your practice has improved as a result of this book study, or even questions, and then comments for us as well, if you have any. So, okay, we're going to get going here. So just as a reminder, if you have PGP, Professional Growth Plan, you can get clock hours for this. And then also any of our admins, teacher friends are with us. Make sure you stop and see your HR, because they have a different way for you to complete that. So we want you to get credit for spending your time and doing this really important work with us. And so please make sure that you get those clock hours. Okay, so our agenda tonight, so, introductions, did that, had a really great primer, like I mentioned, with Dr. Copenhaver, if you get a chance, and weren't able to be part of that conversation, please go and check that out. I'm sure we will have that on YouTube. On our YouTube channel. So today, January 30th, we're having chapter 7 and talking a lot about what that reading comprehension and vocabulary instruction. So I want this to be an interactive chat, and we will do some breakout rooms. I didn't have a lot of time to work with Annie earlier. So Annie, when we get there, we'll just have you break people out in a bunch of different breakout rooms, depending on the number of people we have with us tonight. So we'll try to put you in groups of 5 or 6 or something. So to give you a chance to be able to have those in-depth conversations with other people. And as always, or what we've been doing all along, is that we just kind of dip into chapter 12 and see how does that organization and delivering this effective instruction work with the content that we're kind of splitting out and talking about that. And then next week or next time we meet in February, we're going to be talking about emergent reading. Okay, we have lots to do. So here, save the dates. So February 27th is where we're going to dive into emergent reading. Then we'll go into self-directed reading. And then ending with my favorite, which is talking about writing. Can't wait for those discussions. So we had some common language. If you've been here with us all along, you've heard us talk about this common language. We have so much to get through tonight, and looking at the time, I want to make sure we do that. But we really want to make sure that we have this understanding and that everybody is here and you're shouting it from the rooftops that everyone can learn to read and write. We are going to be looking at not the act of, but the process of learning, right? Everyone has that potential for learning, and we are going to be doing everything we can to look and figure out how to do that in the best way possible. So we're modeling, of course, talking about aided language stimulation or aided language input. But as teachers, we do this all the time. We are constantly modeling. We're doing that looking at that gradual release of responsibility, right? Or whatever piece you call that. So, but we're going to, I do, you do, we do. We're modeling those pieces, always learning how to figure out how to provide access, whether that's to reading, to books, to writing, whatever it is in the classroom of the learning that we're doing. And then meaningful opportunities for what we're doing, meaningful opportunities for reading and writing, and then accepting all of the attempts. So it's accepting all writing, accepting all reading, all communication attempts, right? There's different forms. We accept them all, and then we celebrate. And then if they're not quite where we need them to be, then we provide meaning, right? When we teach, that's what we're here to do. So that kind of common language is going to bring us through all of this, is that we've all subscribed, all are hanging our hat on this. So we've talked in the past, and we just heard Dr. Copenhaver just talk about, I have that from last time where we were talking about sight recognition. I should have gotten rid of that. So ignore the red circly thing at the bottom, because what we're going to be talking about is this upper strand of the reading rope. And so all of these pieces are within comprehensive literacy instruction in this book. And so this just kind of helps us kind of understand that reading, writing, listening, speaking is all kind of tangled up. And as we pull those strands apart, then we can start seeing the individual building blocks that are in there that help create readers and writers. And so we're going to be on this upper strand, which is one of the things I feel that, and they talk about in the book in this chapter, is that we've done an okay job, with some of these pieces at the bottom, especially sight recognition, and sight words, but we haven't done a really great job with individuals with significant disabilities at that upper strand, that language comprehension. So building that background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, or that sentence structure and syntax, and verbal reasoning and literacy knowledge, like all of those pieces we're going to be pulling apart and talking about today. So this was just kind of a reason why, if you've been with us, you know that we didn't start at chapter 1 and go through to chapter 12. We have been mixing it up because we know as teachers that the kids that walk in through that door are the kids that we are going to be teaching that day. And if they are all together, whether they're an emergent reader and writer, or they're a conventional reader and writer, that they are walking in the door. And if that's the time they're with us and they're together, then we need to find ways to be able to do that, right? So we need to be able to give effective and robust instruction to our emergent readers and writers, just as to our conventional readers and writers. And if they're all in the same room, that is hard. And I know I've done it and I've taught it. It's really hard, but there are ways to do that. And we are here as a group to really talk about what that looks like. So it made sense for us to kind of put these areas together. And so right now we're in that reading comprehension and reading area. So, all right, so we're going to get going. But of course, before we start, let's review. We haven't seen each other since mid-December. And so I just want to go over a few of kind of the highlights. And so what we learned, right? So we learned that there's no prerequisites but breathing in order to be a reader and writer. Super important. My friend is looking at you and he's letting you know this is really important. Everyone can be a reader and writer. We also learned in chapter 11 that as we know better, we do better. And we know that picture-supported text actually distracts from learning how to read. It does not help support reading for our individuals especially our individuals that have complex communication needs and complex learning needs, that we need to stop this practice. And so here my friend is yelling that at the top of his lungs. So, and it kind of hurts my heart that, if you go on Teacher Pay Teacher, which is, not a curriculum, it's a place to go and get supportive materials, that there are 78, 100 results. I just kind of wish that some of that stuff would go away. So now that we know better, we do better. And so then now that you know better, you can go out and help support what we know and what the science is telling us on how students learn how to read and write. We just heard this, if you were in, like I've mentioned earlier, in the previous webinar with Dr. David Copenhaver, and he mentioned how they talk about how instruction delivered imperfectly is better than instruction in just one area. And of course is certainly better than no instruction at all. So really an important piece that we dive in. When I started my journey, I didn't do that. To be honest, I started with 3 areas. I didn't start with all of them. It felt too overwhelming for me. And now I know better. I do better, right? Now I know that it's okay if I'm making mistakes, and I make plenty of them. It is okay to make mistakes as we go, but we need to start with as much as we possibly can. Okay. We learned in chapter 3, this is one of my favorite, most powerful sayings in the book. You say it to yourself while I say it out loud as we're delivering alphabet knowledge and doing instructional routines. So all those routines were given to you. And then they're also linked here again, if you're not really, if you didn't get that in the past. So, or send me an email or send to Setzi and we can get those resources out to you of what those routines look like. You can also get them in the book. That's where I got them, but just put them into a nice kind of layout so that I didn't have to go searching through that book. So, okay. So then chapter 10 we talked about some research that what we knew then and what we know now equals changing how we teach. So really good, powerful information about that. We also learned in chapter 10, talking about this using these processors, right? And how we go in and out through all of them to make meaning of these words. So through print, through speech, coming back, that it all cycles back and around. And here we are to chapter 7. Whew. That was a fast 15 minutes. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Or if there was something that we went through too fast from the last few chapters, let us know. Like when we come together, this time is for us to spend learning more about, what's in this book. And if there is something that you just have this burning question and you want to discuss that with colleagues, like we can make time for that. So make sure you put that out. So we're going to start with chapter 7. And so reading chapter 7, I reread it. This is for those, if you can see, this is my book. It is all tabbed and highlighted, and there's more. Now there's more tabs and there's more highlights. And I had it open while I was listening to the last to Dr. Copenhaver, which was great and gave me a chance to highlight more. So of course now I've lost my place. But so now we're in chapter 7, and we're talking about reading comprehension, vocabulary, and comprehension. And when we start that, we're looking at, okay, so how do we do this, right? How do we go about this with students that are, have significant challenges within have complex communication needs. They're like, Dr. Copenhaver said, they're not talking, they're they don't know their letters, or they're not engaged. So how do we start this? So when we're talking about reading comprehension, we have this idea of in kind of trying to figure out what that is. So what does that reading comprehension look like for our students? Well, I mean, it may look a little different, but its essence and its core is the same. So reading comprehension is just that. It is that understanding and the reason why we read. We don't read because we just think it's fun to just like be able to decode letters and into words and then start reading sentences. We read to understand and make meaning from that text. Like that is the ultimate purpose, right? Is to gain meaning from that text. And that has to come from places that are engaging and motivating. Really, that is the heart of everything we've talked about in every chapter so far, is making those that meaningful engagement for our students through literacy, whether that's reading or which we're talking about today with reading comprehension, or when in the future when we start talking about writing, is making that motivating and engaging, right? So questions or thoughts about this when you're thinking about your own classrooms or your own students? You can go ahead and put them in the chat, and I have the chat up. But if you're not there yet to put anything in the chat and you're not quite sure, just write it down on a note. And when we again break out into those breakout rooms, which I'm hoping we'll have a good 10 to 15 minutes in those breakout rooms together today, that you can kind of go over if there's like something that you're really not sure about when it comes to this thing called reading comprehension, right? And understanding, because the chapter is thick and juicy, right? So what does the research say about this and kids with disabilities? So we need to remember that that we need to find these inferences, right? And that we need that to understand written text at a higher level. And we need to address that vocabulary and comprehension, right? That's not addressed in a separate skill, right? We're not going to pull that out. We are going to do it within meaningful, age-respectful text. And we're going to do that. We're not going to isolate those skills. We're going to do that together within that reading. Okay. Excuse me. So we're going to do this. We kind of breaking this out into 2 sections, and they talk about comprehension. And one of the areas they talk about, the kind of 3 areas when you're talking about comprehension, and to break these out. So that integrating that language-based knowledge of the world, right? That schema, right? What do we know? What have we experienced? What have we been part of that I can relate back to? And what do we know about our kids and our learners that have complex bodies and complex communication needs, that they have had less opportunities to experience some of the typical things that their typical developing peers have. And it not because there's been any malintent, it's hard. There can be lots of barriers in the way for accessing that same activity as their neurotypical peers, right? So we need to kind of think about that when we're thinking about comprehension and we're looking at that schema, right? And it may mean that we need to develop that schema and help them develop that schema first, right? And they talk about that. We'll talk about that later when we talk about like setting that stage and talking about events or giving opportunities to learn that, right? So and to have these experiences in different ways. They also talk comprehension is talking about inferences, and they kind of split these up into two sections. So this intersentence inference, and you'll see this on page 101 really specifically, that they talk about making inferences. And they talk about this where there's this intersentence inference. And kind of what that means is that idea of connecting ideas, right? From sentence to sentence, we're making connections within the text. So when I was teaching, we'd go from self to text, right? We're making those connections within that text. And then you have that gap filling inferences that they refer to. And that is like understanding and having those inferences from information from your schema that you bring in from yourself to the world, right? That you have that knowledge of, that where that schema becomes so important, or that background knowledge becomes so important, because it's not information that's in the text. You have, as a reader, you have to bring that information into the text to make meaning from that, right? We are filling those gaps. So, when I first read these two pieces on inferences, I had to kind of go back and kind of understand how those two are connected, but also a little different, and how they are both so important when it comes to comprehension. And then they talk about, in the same chapter, talk about that language comprehension. And that is that idea of having receptive language and that understanding. You can see the threads that are tying all in there that lead us into that vocabulary, which is the next thing we'll talk about. And what do we know about our learners? We know that our learners with disabilities and language disabilities, complex communication needs, that they often have deficits within this receptive language. So knowing that where we have struggles, right? And then where we need to be armed with all of the tools, but then also knowing where our kids and where they are having successes, right? Where are their strengths, and where can we start from to build this comprehension, right? And to build this understanding. So, and then we go into vocabulary, which I love. I love working on vocabulary. So we need to understand that deep meaning, right? And it makes the sentence, it makes the book have meaning. And we get from vocabulary to get to comprehension, right? We're connecting those concepts with words. We're going to learn and have this robust receptive vocabulary. And they also talk about, and I'm just looking at it right now, on page, where was the tiered vocabulary? If someone has it, throw it in the chat, where they talk about the tiered vocabulary. I thought I had it written right here. Oh, here it is. Okay, on page 107. So if you have your book, 107 really kind of talks about that tiered vocabulary, and really understanding that, we have to have, many of our students we need to have the kind of that baseline when we're selecting that vocabulary. And so we want to be able to have, and they give this really great table, 7.2 in there, that gives examples of that tiered vocabulary. And I want to, we'll kind of go through that. Uh, in a little bit as I show you some tools that you can do to help with and using some of that tier one vocabulary to be able to build up your comprehension and understanding and deep meanings of other words. And so we'll go through that. Any questions that anybody has about, I mean, these are two big pieces, and I encourage you to really go back if you haven't had a chance, but go back and read those few pages. We're talking about like 4 pages, 4 or 5 pages to go back through, and it gives you that really foundation and concrete understanding of where we're going and our purpose, right? Which is we're going to go to next. So I don't see anything in the chat yet. So, but please put that in there if you. So I'm just going to pause for a second. So we talk about vocabulary, and this is one of my favorite tools that I love to use. If you've seen this, you can go back, and I think we have it on the Setsy channel where I've talked about vocabulary and how to use this expanded expression tool. And what I love about this is that if I don't have the word, so if I don't have the word heart in my talker, or I don't know how to even access that, but maybe I can talk about about different words, and I can give you different words to describe what that is and to talk about that vocabulary. We're going to be using all those tier one words to really to get to that piece and that vocabulary. And now I'm going to have a really deep understanding, right? We're going to have a deep understanding of like, what is that group? Right? What is the category that it's in? What does it do? What does it look like? What is it made out of? Like my kids loved that. They're like skin and muscle, and it's bleeding and it's gross. Like it's awesome. All the words that they come up with, and the different parts. Where would you find it, and what else do you know about it? There were often times when I would use this tool that we didn't go through all of these pieces, but it started to bring up like what was said earlier with Dr. Copenhagen. It's not about the WH questions, right? We're going to get into that when we're working and doing the car in the crowd and having that shared literacy experience. But first we need to, we don't want to be testing. What is this? It's a heart. We don't want to be doing that. We want to have this discussion and have a really robust understanding and build up our schema and background knowledge of what that looks like. And how can you do that? Well, I brought in some sound so that while we were talking about the heart, it just wasn't what we were seeing, but it was also about what we were hearing. And having that up on the board, we were looking at letters, but we were also describing it and being able to use some of those tier one letters. We were also looking at the sounds. And then we were like, now what do we do with this, right? So what are some active activities that we can do? So of course, they're all going to play it at once. I wanted them to stop, not play it all at once. There we go. Okay. Whew. That was close. So when we get into these 108 through 116, and someone put, oh, thanks, Sarah, for putting the expanded expression tool in there. If you guys are interested, it's a really great tool. It's one of my favorites. So anchor, read, apply is part of the kind of the rock in the center of when we're doing comprehensive literacy and when we're working with comprehension and vocabulary building and reading, and when we're working shared reading activities, we are really wanting to do this. So what does this mean? So with anchor, right, we want to activate the background knowledge. We want to build that knowledge around text structures, and we want to set that purpose for reading. So I'm going to go back here and only but like setting the purpose for reading, we're learning about the heart. I'm going to hear the heart. They're going to get we're so excited. Like, wait, that's a heart. I know what that sounds like. So then we were able to talk about all these pieces, right? Okay. And of course, I knew that they were all going to start. I should have waited. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we anchor that. And this was one of the activities that we did with one of our, when we chose a real authentic text, age, respectful, age appropriate, and to get them excited. It was The Wizard of Oz. We lived in Washington State. There aren't a lot of tornadoes that happen. Their background knowledge and schema of tornadoes was not existent, right? They just didn't know, and even the neurotypical peers didn't know what a tornado was. So we had to activate that knowledge. We had to build that knowledge, right? And so we made tornadoes. And so it was a fun way to be able to do that. So of course, now let's play it again. And you can see that it's spinning, and it was a great science project to be able to do that. So then we get into read, right? So we're going to read or listen with purpose, right? Independent reading. We want our time here. We've talked in the past about the car and the crowd, right? So comment, ask, and repeat. We want to have that time. And so spending that time doing that. So that was just a really short clip of us, one, also using our assistive technology tools and me modeling them within the classroom so that our students, when they go to read independently or using their tools independently, that they've seen those assistive technology tools modeled constantly. And then this one, which is then apply. So we're going to check for understanding. We're going to do that purpose. We're going to give informative feedback. And this is where my students had to, and I know that I should have made it a little bigger so that you can see it, but they had a heart now. And so we've gone through, and now we're back to the text, and they are waiting for heart to come up. And so they're listening, and they're waiting for that word that we've worked so hard on to be able to really understand. And once it does, they're going to raise their heart. 25. Did you hear the last one? Yeah. You did. You heard two of them. And of course, we're going to celebrate that, right? So as soon as they heard that in the text, they're going to raise their heart, and they're going to celebrate, like, I know what that is. So they look at how actively engaged they are. They're leaning forward. They're right there. They are right with me, and they are in that text, and they are reading right with me. So, and as we check for those fun ways to do that, check for understanding. Okay. Whew, boy, it's 8:06 already. The time goes so fast. So I want us to kind of go back into a breakout room, and there's a kind of like two things. I'm going to go ahead first, and then I'm going to come back. So give Annie just a minute to get those breakout rooms ready. Next time when we come back, our breakout room is going to be really about how do we brainstorm ways to co-teach and combine this reading comprehension vocabulary instruction, right, to more of our kids that are comprehensive learners, and then go back to our emergent and our kids that are emergent and shared reading. So how are we going to bring those together like we've done in the past with decoding and with phonological awareness, along with word work activities? So know that's coming, right? And you may want to talk about that, but I'm going to give you guys some time here to think about that tailored vocabulary instruction for students who use AAC. Some of the recommendations that Dr. Copenhaver gave was like he had like word work, and for that phonological and word work ideas, kind of some of that, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, when you give that tailored instruction for students who use AAC, or for even if they don't use AAC and they do have other means and ways of communicating, how are we going to tailor that vocabulary instruction or tailor that comprehension with students, right? So here are a couple ideas. We have some notes. I'm going to take everybody. I triple checked, right? Um, what these notes are. And so we're going to split out into groups. I know it says, I'm just going to get rid of this. It's explicit instruction, embedded instruction. And really the idea is like, what are some of the things, and it doesn't even have to be that, maybe it is something else your group really wants to discuss. I'm going to give you, I think it's really important because we've been through so many chapters to give you some of that time to kind of talk. What I'd love to do is give you about 10 minutes to do that. Put your notes in the note section here, and then I'd love for each group to just give a little spiel about what they talked about in their breakout session. Okay, well, that was super fun and engaging. I jumped into one of the rooms. It was great. We had some great discussions about how this is hard. It's really hard to organize, and if you are new to this, one of the things, like, I've been doing it the same way. I've been doing this stuff for 25 years. I've been using different programs that are sight word based. I've been using different programs, right, that are just this. And now this is blowing my head apart. And now I need to figure out how to do this, make this happen. And that's really, really challenging, right? It's really challenging. Any of the groups want to just talk and let us know kind of some of the things you guys talked about? What kind of discussions did you guys have? And if you want to put it in the chat, if that's better for you, you can do that too. We only have a few minutes left. So and if group 2 or group 3 wants to come in and talk, please do. Chapter 7, wrapping it up, looking at, if you haven't read kind of this literacy Bill of Rights, we're going to be talking about organizing and where to start. Just as a reminder, we had Dr. David Copenhaver is for you to join the conversations, and here are some future dates. If you missed today, you can always go back and when it gets posted on the SETSA YouTube channel to take a look at that. And we also have resources as well. But if you have any takeaways or things you want to learn about more, there's Jamboard, and you can always go and talk and give us some. We read them, we take them to heart. We change what we do based on your feedback. So please give us that feedback. So we're going to be talking about emergent reading and really dive into what that emergent reading looks like. I kind of talked about Car in the Crowd a little bit. So we're going to be diving into more of that. Any questions or thoughts? Okay. So thank you everyone for coming. Tonight's book study, chapter 7. Remember that we're reading chapter 4. Is that right? Yeah, emergent literacy, emergent shared reading for next time. See you everyone.